choosing your technology, the first thing you need to do is
I'll plan out every single one of those, and I get down to the nerd level detail of timing each type of scan.
you have to ask yourself why you're getting the data and what you're going to be using it for.
When should I look at a mobile? When should I look at a terrestrial?
This is where it really shines, or those areas that don't need as much accuracy.
Hopefully this provides some value and insight back to you guys.
My whole world is 3D modeling, virtual augmented reality, scanning, drones, you name it. We're trying to apply technology to build better buildings.
Today we are going to be talking about terrestrial and mobile mapping, and we've got David and Brandon here, and we'll go ahead and do introductions. So those that don't know me, my name is Matthew Byrd, founder and host of RCN, and we are hosting this webinar. We've got David from Envision Construction, and then we've got Brandon from Faro. So let's go over to David, and I'd love to just get a little bit of background so people know really where you're coming from in this conversation. So David, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. I'm David Epps, Chief Technology Officer for Envision Construction, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I guess I've been scanning since around 2008. Various levels of TLS use, more recently SLAM use, drones, LiDAR. My whole world is BIM, 3D modeling, virtual augmented reality, scanning, drones, you name it. We're trying to apply technology to build better buildings. So I've been doing it for my entire career. Always looking for the next best thing, the next new technology that can help make our jobs easier and help us provide better quality to our clients. So looking forward to the conversation here today. I hope to give you some feedback on how I've used a lot of this stuff, the pain points, the benefits, the importance of planning that we're going to talk about. So excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, glad you could join us. All right, Brandon.
Yeah, so a little bit different than David. I came into Faro about 2.5 years ago. I was going straight out of college into a rotational development program, and I transitioned into a field application engineer role about 1.5 years ago, where I'm more of the technical expert on the focus and the scene aspect of our technology. I've worked with David a few times, talking about different workflows and everything like that. So I know he's gonna be able to give some awesome insight on our products. And I'm excited to also give you some insight on how to use our different catalog now.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you. I know we'll go ahead and start.
Just to give a starting idea here, picture this campus, and if you needed to capture any type of measurement inside of this campus, we need to first ask ourselves a few questions. And, David, you've worked on things like a campus when you're trying to recreate it virtually with our technology. So I'm just going to ask you really quick, when you have a project like this, what are you going to first start with when you're asking yourself about what you're needing to capture?
I think as cliche as it sounds, you got to start with the end in mind, right? You got to figure out what the final deliverable is going to be used for. Am I creating a 3D model for a client? Do I need just a general idea of topography for the entire campus? Am I making boxes to show where buildings are? That kind of really dictates, and you back into what technology you're going to use. In some cases, I might just use a drone just to get an overall view of the site and get an overall placement of all the buildings, and then kind of drill in from there, do laser scanning inside, close to the buildings to get the detail that I need. But really kind of stepping back and looking at this whole campus like this holistically, I would start from here and kind of plan out what the final goal is. Maybe I only want to detail out certain buildings. I can drill into that. Maybe I'll use a TLS or an Orbis scanner for that, but the drone might be good enough to do a lot of this. It really depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. It really does depend on the project, right? You have to ask yourself why you're getting the data and what you're going to be using it for. And just like you said, I think taking a site-wide look at things, whether that's from a drone or just Google Maps, can really help you out to understand what you're going into. So that idea of asking why and what we're using it for is going to come up a lot when we're talking about the idea of choosing the right tool to use. And, we are looking at the outside of our school. Now, if we look inside, we've got classrooms, labs, mechanical rooms, all different types of areas that need to be scanned differently depending on what you need once again. So David, when you're going through a larger building, or whether it be a hospital campus, these larger types of data sets, what do you need to watch out for when you're scanning?
I mean, you really got to think about, well, how much time do you have for starters? That's really going to dictate what type of scanner I'm going to use. Time you have, and then what level of quality and detail you really need. If you're just trying to get floor plans, you want to get columns and floors and walls and things like that, like on the left, you just want to get that classroom overall detail. I think the Orbis is fantastic for that because it's really quick. If you want to really go in there and get every nut and bolt, and you want to model out every detail, like the mechanical room off to the right, you're probably going to want to use a TLS or a static scanner of some sort to really get the detail that you need. So that you can go back and actually model it correctly. So, and everything in between, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I actually, right when we started with introducing the flash technology, which we're going to discuss a little bit later for our premium scanner, the first place we tried it out in was a school, because it has those areas where you just need a floor plan. And this was before, of course, we had the Orbis in store. So we're always coming out with things that can improve on the workflow. So we're going to definitely talk about that quite a bit. And once again, I just want to reiterate something that we've touched on a little bit when it comes to choosing your technology. The first thing you need to do is take a step back and not just rush right into a scan job. For some people, they start with 30 to 50 scan projects or scan site projects, to where it's not that many scans. But once they start going into those 100 to 500 to maybe even 1,000s, like you've done, David, you have to take a step back and plan really well first. You can't just rush in. So when you are planning, what has planning done for you in the past on certain projects, or where has it bit you if you didn't start planning?
I mean, when I first started out, I certainly did that, where I just started scanning, right? And just kind of went room by room, floor by floor, and all of a sudden you realize you could spend an entire day on one level with the floor that you had to do the entire building up, right? And so you have way too much data, way too much, you got way too much because you want to get as much as you can, right? So you're probably using the wrong resolution. You're not really thinking about it. But that was kind of like my earlier years. Now I literally plan out every single job with what resolution I'm going to scan in each hallway versus a room versus a transition scan into a room. This is like the TLS workflow, obviously. But I'll plan out every single one of those, and I get down to the nerd level detail of timing each type of scan. And I'll have an actual map that says exactly how long I should be out there. So I know how many batteries I'll need, how much time I'm going to need. Is it an active campus? Is it going to be an active area where I need to go in and, I only have an hour or two to scan a specific area because it's a school, or if it's a dormitory where people are living there and I got to work around that. There's all sorts of constraints and areas and variables that you have to take into account when you're planning. And if you don't, you're going to end up running into a situation where you can't get the data that you need because of all sorts of these exterior factors.
Yeah. And once again, coming back to this campus idea, you'd definitely rather scan during a holiday and plan it for that versus, for a homecoming game or something where you got thousands of people coming in, and that just would become a nightmare. So definitely that idea of planning, asking the people that you're scanning for, or planning ahead on that, can really make a big difference, especially just like we were talking about with choosing the correct tool. You don't want to just go in with one tool when you should have brought the other one.
And you mentioned having a 30 to 50 scan type project versus 100 to 1,000 scan type projects. If you really think about it, even a campus like this, you can break these apart into separate projects and have little sub projects. Use the clustering methodology that Faro is really famous for, and just really organize it into smaller, bite-sized chunks, and then combine it all together using control across the entire site. So it's a little bit easier way to kind of manage those overall large data sets.
Yeah, if you tried to plan everything out on a map and had 1,000 scans, that might make your brain hurt a little bit. So yeah,
it's a little overwhelming.
Break it up. All right. So and once again, the idea of this webinar is to give you a little bit of insight on Orbis as well as our TLS options, and to open up that idea of a toolbox to you guys, because at the end of the day, all of these what we call solutions are tools in the fact that they aren't going to just solve your problem right then and there. It's a workflow that you need to abide by, and that's why we plan for it. That's why we know that you're not going to use a hammer to screw in a screw, right? So, David, when it comes to choosing the right tool, has there ever been a situation where you went in with the wrong tool or not knowing how to use that reality capture device?
Well, for the longest time, all I had was a terrestrial laser scanner. So that's the only tool that I had. I had a hammer and I had to figure out how to screw in bolts with it, right? So it was overkill, honestly, for a lot of things that we were doing, but it was the tool that we had. So we were, full on trying to get millimeter accuracy data for every single thing. And it was a lot of data we were capturing, specifically like hotels, dormitories, these smaller type projects where you have a lot of rooms, a lot of jumping in and out, a lot of transition scans. It took a long time to do that from a capture standpoint, from a registration standpoint. Just overall data management was a bit cumbersome. But again, it was the only tool that we had. So was it wrong? I don't know. We didn't have alternatives. But it makes me appreciate tools like SLAM technology, like the Orbis, in that now when I have a situation like that, really all I need is a floor plan, and a TLS is probably way overkill. I can pick up the Orbis and scan it in a fraction of the time and give me the information that I need much faster from a capture standpoint and from a registration standpoint. So that's where I get excited about SLAM in general, right?
That's where Faro's catalog or toolbox has expanded a lot over the past, even 3 years with the acquisition of course, GeoSLAM and making the Orbis a reality. And even when it comes to, Hollow Builder with project management. So just going into a little bit of a more picturesque view of this idea, we've got our Focus Premium and our Focus Core. These are our laser scanners that a lot of people are more used to, our TLS, terrestrial laser scanners, that you're going to set up, scan for a few minutes, move it to the next spot, and it's going to get you some really, really great data that, you're not going to get with any other device. But the speed, it's the minute range, right? It's the 2 to 5 minute range usually. Moving on to the Orbis, which, that's our mobile scanner that is able to just capture it while you're walking with it. You're basically painting the walls while you walk. You're going to be getting good data, that 5 to 10 millimeter range rather than the 1 to 2 with our premium. You're going to be getting good data, but the speed is more what you're talking about. Just like David was saying with those floor plans, this is where it really, really shines, or those areas that don't need as much accuracy. And moving up to our top left corner, we've got great speed and great data quality with our flash technology. And this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the PowerPoint, where we are really going to be focusing on different ways you can utilize the scanners for certain areas. And lastly, for our quick visual consumption, that's our Hollow Builder and our Sitescape mobile app. Hollow Builder is going to allow you to do some project management with just PanoCam pictures, go through a site and get what you need there with pictures. You don't always need scan data for every project or for what you're trying to show. So we have that as well. And then Sitescape, we put the idea of scanning in the hands of everyone that has a iOS product with LiDAR capability. You can just go out and scan. Of course, there's going to be a little bit more noise and less accuracy, but it's almost like you can, instead of taking pictures, you can go out and scan just with your phone. It's very, very cool. All of this is centered around this Sphere XG platform, which is our cloud platform. And this isn't something that everyone needs to use, but it will be very, very useful for sharing information with other people. It's going to have the ability to upload models, point clouds, the Hollow Builder picture, floor plans. All of what Faro wants this to be is a hub that you're able to see everything about your project in. And that's going to be coming a little bit later this year. It's already rolled out, but the whole idea of everything being there is going to be coming later this year. So that's just a little bit about what we have here. And you can see there's a lot of options. And sometimes that can be the real hard thing about choosing what you want to use for a project. So today we're really going to dive into our focus premium with Flash, and our Faro Orbis workflows, and when to use which one. Because just like I was saying, that's the hard part about deciding for a lot of people. Some people have kind of gotten the idea that the Orbis is a replacement of the focus, when that is not the case at all. They are a complementary tool. So of course, the focus, you're going to set that down for a few minutes at a time, let it get really, really accurate data, and you're able to move on to the next spot as long as there's overlap. Our focus premium with Flash, that's something that we'll talk about a little later, where it uses the PanoCam to help infill some data, upscale some data, so that instead of it taking minutes, it takes under 30 seconds to get colorized capture. And then lastly, of course, our Orbis, that's going to be the mobile scanning with also a little bit of a hybridized workflow that you're able to do by getting better data with Flash technology. So we'll first start at the beginning of the Orbis, how it actually works. It uses SLAM technology, which you can see stands for simultaneous localization and mapping. And this is something that GeoSLAM has worked on over years and years, and has made it way better than we could have ever imagined, being able to capture any data that has good geometric areas. So the SLAM algorithm uses the sensor information as well as the mapped environment to let people know where they are using our stream device, and keep the data going, keep the data being stitched together. So it's going to know exactly where you are and tell you on an app, and you'll be able to see the data while you're scanning. So it lets you know if you've gotten everything or if you missed an area, which is really, really handy in that sense. And I'm sure, David,
have to come back to the site. Like if you run into situations where you realize you forgot a room or you have a dead spot, having that live map that kind of shows you what you've missed is super helpful.
And that's what I was just about to ask you. This idea of this stream app that came out with our premium a little while ago has really made a difference for a lot of people's workflow, whether it's premium or the Orbis. That stream app has made sure they can leave with confidence, as well as know that everything will come together very easily. So now that we've gotten you an idea of how the Orbis works, and of course how TLS is working, we can talk about the idea of TLS and SLAM and when to use them. That speed versus accuracy question that everyone asks during a site. And you can see up here, it says SLAM versus TLS. That's a little bit of the wrong way to look at it when we're actually thinking about how to use it as a full workflow. So tell me a little bit about when you would choose, David, to use either a mobile scan or a TLS scan, and when to maybe combine the two as well.
Well, like I kind of mentioned before, all I had was a TLS for a long time. So I really didn't have a choice. All I had was accuracy, which was great. But again, if I was just trying to get a floor plan or something, or project we were pursuing, I didn't really need that millimeter accuracy. I just needed a floor plan for the space, general square footage, stuff like that. And I didn't have a whole lot of time. I had to really get creative with how I was using the TLS just to get overall floor plans for this building, right? So all these projects are renovation type work where we didn't have any kind of floor plans whatsoever. So I would have to figure out a creative way to get a really high level view of that using the TLS. So I got very good at doing that, but I would much rather pick up an Orbis and go walk the site or walk the building or whatever the conditions are to really quickly gather that really rough floor plan. And again, from a registration standpoint, I would spend sometimes days. Like some of these jobs didn't have control on them. So we didn't have the ability to actually set up project control. So we would go in there and almost have to scan by scan stitch these things together, because it might be 3 floors of a hotel or something that was very repetitive, and so it wouldn't just automatically come together. So it took a lot of time on the back end trying to put all that stuff together. But SLAM just allows you to really quickly just kind of walk the entire site. It does that registration for you, which is what's really exciting to me. And then we haven't really talked as much about the flash scans on the SLAM, on the Orbis, but they use the SLAM algorithm as their registration, which is what's really cool to me. So even if you remove the SLAM data altogether and you just have the flash scans, you are all tied together and registered already just because of the SLAM algorithm in the background.
Yep.
So that's where I've kind of really been starting to use that, is whatever rooms I really need detail in, I'll use the SLAM in the background as my registration, and then just go and walk from room to room to get the detail that I need. So really, it's the nimble, flexible use of the tools that are available now are really, really great. And I haven't talked about outside type stuff, but like scanning, I've had some really, really good experiences scanning like existing sites or treed areas, wooded areas, where using a TLS is almost impossible without setting up spheres and targets and stuff like that. If I'm trying to get topography of an existing site, it's really, really tough to do it. You know, it takes a day or two to get able to TLS. I walked a site that was very, very wooded and dense, and I was very, very surprised how well the Orbis tracked through the trees, through the woods, bushes, you name it, and it actually tracked perfectly well all the way back to the beginning. I used GeoSLAM years ago before Faro bought them, and I've been very impressed with how well the algorithms has advanced from a SLAM standpoint, because I did not love the GeoSLAM, to be honest, back in the day when I was using it. I had a hard time using it, but it's really, really improved. And it's a testament to whatever you guys are doing behind the scenes in those boxes, because it works really, really well. So it's definitely a tool that I would pick up in those type of instances where the speed is really what I need.
Yeah, and those developers do all the magic, right? So yeah, just like you were saying, I've heard similar things, especially with that forested area. You know, when it comes to terrestrial laser scanning, a lot of people get really worried when they start seeing a lot of trees everywhere. You know, it's going to hurt the registration. It's a little bit brutal. So it's really good to see that you're seeing the value of not only using it in already places that you can scan in, but places you might not have been able to get accurate or even good scans in to begin with, right? So that's really great to hear. All right. And something else I saw in the chat, you know, someone asked, you know, about a wearable way of scanning. That actually is doable with, you know, the Orbis. You can create a mount and just walk with it. People have also, you know, mounted it to their cars and driven around with it. So you take speed to an extra level there. Of course, you're going to lose some quality of data when you're moving that fast. But if you're just trying to get around and get a good overview of something, you can get it very, very quick with mounting options. All right. So we've got this look at an area that was scanned with 125 terrestrial scans inside of a building. And you can see here we've got 5 hours of field capture, 4 hours of processing and registration, and 1 to 2 millimeters of accuracy. And David, I just want you to take me through the idea of scanning this area and where challenges might be or things that can cause a headache when you're talking about terrestrial laser scanning in a setting like this.
This entire visual gives me PTSD just looking at it, because this is how I would plan out every single one of my buildings. I would actually use different colors depending on the resolution I was using for each scan. And then I would have to add up based on how the time would add up for each one of the scans. And I have an overall exactly what you're doing here, how long it would literally take me, how many bags I would need to bring on site, what kind of breaks I would need in time, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But as you can see there, every single one of those rooms needs a scan, and sometimes maybe two if there's stuff in the rooms or it's a bathroom or what you got to get around stalls. But every single room needs a transition scan of some sort. And you can get creative. You can see some of those. It's using one scan for 2 rooms, and I would start to do that as well, just to kind of eliminate. But this
and sometimes if you try to do that, it could hurt you in the.
It can hurt you more than it helps you. One thing I've learned is if you start skimping on scans in between, it ends up hurting you more. Just take the extra 30 seconds to get the other scan versus try and, you know, weasel out of it, because you'll spend 10 times as long trying to piece it together in the registration process in the back end. But yeah, this is exactly how I would plan out all my TLS scans. This looks very similar to like a hotel or a residence hall or something like that, where it's just room after room after room. And it's rinse and repeat over and over and over again. But also, if you don't have any kind of control set up, if you just dump all this into Faro, the scene, it will probably have issues because of the repetitive nature of the rooms. So unless you cluster appropriately on site, or, you know, really keep track of the map of how you're scanning and do that on the back end, this will have a hard time coming together registration wise on its own.
And yeah, and that was a really, really big issue throughout the years of scanning. And another thing that has helped quite a bit is that Stream app as well.
The Stream definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, you can position the scans, and then now with our interactive registration, you're able to add connections straight from the project if you bring it in already pre-registered with that Stream app. So we've made some improvements in areas like this where I know it could have been a pain, doing a top view registration like that and mixing rooms up. So our hardware and our software has been trying to keep up with each other to make things easier for everyone. But in this specific area, the thing that really would make me be like, oh man, this is going to be a rough project is all these different doorways, right? Just like you were saying, sometimes you want to skimp on a scan, but it can hurt you. So sometimes you do have to add in, an extra 100 scans just because there's so many doorways. Whereas if it was just an open space, this could have been done in, 30 scans maybe. So that's where these areas really become taxing on time for TLS. Now, we look at this information here, and then we can go to using the Orbis, just mobile scanning. Instead of 125 captures, it's one capture. Instead of 5 hours, it's 30 minutes to just capture and walk around. 3 hours of processing. Of course, depending on if you want color and, filters, that can go up or down. But that 5 to 10 millimeters of accuracy, that's what you're giving off to get that time. And you have to decide, once again, why you're scanning and what you're going to be using it for to decide, maybe I do need to do the 125 scans in this area. Or maybe I'm just looking to get the general layout. I'm okay with the accuracy penalty by using it. So, I mean, this is a lot better than scanning for 5 hours, I would say, right, David?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time we're just trying to get floor plans like this. I have had scenarios where we're trying to get exact window placement, for example, inside and outside of buildings for replacement purposes. And I did need a TLS for that because I did need that accuracy. But most of the time, this was just creating a 3D model of the existing space for various reasons. So this is certainly a lot faster. And you have here 3 hours total time, but the key point here is it's only 30 minutes to capture it. So I could capture that, and then I could be driving home and it can be processing, right? So it's not 3 hours on site, it's 3 hours total. So you may only have a window in this case of, an hour or half hour where people get a lunch or people are on break for some reason. This is a lot easier than trying to tell them, hey, you guys got to be out of your rooms for the next 5-6 hours because I need to scan, right?
Yep. And obviously, if you have only one or the other, you have to use that one. But if you have both, you can use this. Right. You can use the Orbis to get the whole building in 30 minutes. And then if you have two people there, or even if you're a single person, you can get those window areas with the TLS and combine them together inside of our registration software.
That's the beauty of having all the different tools available to you.
Yep. It's not one or the other always. It's how can I use them in conjunction, and when is it best to? So we'll dive more into that idea a little bit later. So just to give you the TLDR on the Orbis, you scan more in less time, right? You're able to move around freely. You're just walking around just as if you're almost surveying the site before going out. You get the complete scan workflow with one device in certain situations, right? We once again need to think about it as, why are we scanning and what are we doing? So that's sometimes you can get everything you need with just the Orbis. Registration can be eliminated if you are able to get the full capture in one scan. But just like I was saying, you can combine Orbis to Orbis, Orbis to TLS as well. So it's not like you can't register this to each other. It's very easy to, especially with, once again, our new and improved interactive registration.
Yeah, I would typically, like for that example of that floor, I would scan the entire floor with the Orbis just to get the overall floor plan, and then use the TLS up the stairwells just to get that accuracy that you need going floor to floor.
Yep. So that you can combine it and not have as much drift going on.
Yep.
And lastly, of course, with reduced time, you have reduced labor costs and risk, right? For some people that might be joining, they might be on, construction sites and things that are active. So the faster they can get out of there, there's less that can go on. And especially if people are all moving around while you're doing your scanning, the scanner can get bumped. It can accidentally get knocked over. So getting out of there is nice to do. And we have this quote: precision in motion, simplicity in action. I mean, David, using the Orbis for the first time, with maybe a little bit of help from one of my coworkers, how was the actual idea of capturing? Was it easy for you to learn? Was it a little bit tough to learn at first, and then with practice it came into play? How was it for you?
I picked it up pretty quick. I was one of the beta testers for it, and I had experience with the GeoSlam in the past. And I kept trying to do the figure 8 loops and things that GeoSlam told me to do that apparently you don't need to do as much now constantly. So I think it's a lot easier. Once you kind of get the workflow down, you just kind of realize it's like painting with a digital paint sprayer. It's kind of the way I think about it, because it's not scanning behind yourself, right? I kind of think of it as like anywhere that I'm pointing this thing is just going to spray digital points. So if I walk into a room and think of it like that, I'm just kind of like painting everything that I can see. And so I'm just maneuvering around based off of that. And that's, doing this over and over and over again and just processing all the data sets, I found that with that mentality, the data turns out really well. And I'll spend an extra couple of seconds in each room if I need to kind of spin around, just because in my mind, that makes me think that I can get more data, right? Because it's all line of sight, right?
Yep.
It's literally just like painting,
It is.
you see, you're getting data, but if you can't see it, you're not getting that. So you got to walk over there and go get it. But it's fairly intuitive to use. And once you get used to it, it's, the data is nice to see. And once you have the app too, you can kind of see where you are, which gives you that instant feedback, to give you that confidence and that certainty that you've got the data that you need before you actually leave the site.
Yeah. And, I felt like when I first used it as well, it was it was almost too easy. I thought I was doing something wrong when I was using it. I was like, am I doing this right? But really all you need to do when you're doing this is close your loops, right? Make sure you have those closed loops. You start and end where you began, and you round corners instead of just doing a hard cut. Those are the main things that I've taken away. There's a few others for different projects, but very, very simple to use in my eyes. And once again, being able to just walk around with it, I feel like you can give this tool to anyone with maybe just one practice round, and you're going to be good. They're going to be good to go.
It actually does stairwells fairly well. I said that before. I was chopping them up by floor, but it will handle stairwells surprisingly better than I thought it was going to. I end up scanning those slower and doing more strategic, like really, really kind of painting the area better, just to make sure that it knows where I am and it knows where it's coming from, where it's been, because that's how the SLAM algorithm works, right? It's trying to figure out where you are based off where you come from. So as long as you're going very slow and strategic with that, you can go up and down stairwells and it will be successful. Sometimes it'll mess up, but as long as you're like slow and methodical about it, I've found pretty good success doing it.
It's a learning experience every time you scan, right?
Oh, you learn something every single time. I'm always trying something new, trying to push it to its edge and see, how I can make it flex and see how I can make it work and break it. But once you get used to it, it's a pretty cool experience.
That's why we like scanning at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to a little bit of a different topic here, the focus premium with Flash. So we talked about this a little bit, and we talked about the Flash for Orbis. So let's discuss that a little bit. The focus premium with Flash is a paid subscription so that you can use the PanoCam that's mounted on the premium in this picture to upscale data. And you're going to, with this Flash scan, be able to select a profile that allows you to do these under 30 second colorized data, where it's going to get less points from the scanner at first, and then it's going to upscale that with the picture in mind. So it's a way of getting still very accurate data, but increasing the speed. Now, in these areas that you do it, you do want to do it usually in less detailed areas. If we were to get this pipe here, I think we could do a pretty good job with it. But if we were in a MEP room with, hundreds of pipes going around, that's going to cause a little bit more confusion of, how much data you're actually going to get from that. You want to make sure you're not missing out on the important things there. So David, with your experience using the flash set, where do you think it shines the most, and where do you think, once again, you've stretched those limits a little bit past what you think it's able to do?
I think it comes down to speed, honestly. When you need something in between just using the static TLS and the Orbis, I think this kind of really, that's where this technology sings. You know, it's fast, but it also gives you color. Like a lot of times I'll sacrifice, I prefer scanning in color just because it gives, you know, the final data looks a lot better. Clients understand it better. I mean, you can look at this from this picture. If you didn't notice those orange painted areas, you wouldn't really maybe not know that's fire protection, right?
Yeah.
So, or whatever it is. So you know, I think that the flash really sings in that area where you don't have enough time to really do the full TLS, but the Orbis isn't going to give you the detail that you need. So
yeah, and
I don't really use it.
And you know, when, like I was talking about, you know, I first scanned a school with when flash was just introduced, and it saved us, you know, hours and hours. And I've also went down a whole my whole apartment area where it's the third floor of my hallways, 200 scans using flash, because there were such narrow hallways. I needed to do a lot there. If I were to be using the regular, just, you know, minute and a half to 2 minutes of scanning, especially with color, I mean, that would have taken,
Take forever.
you know,
Yeah.
days. It could have been taken a day or even a day and a half just to get that. So this flash really does make a difference for certain things, but other areas where you need detail and high amounts of resolution, you can switch back and forth, which makes it very, very easy. So you can flash an area where there is just, you know, things that you don't need. It's a connecting room or even maybe a doorway scan in that sense. And then you can, of course, switch back to your higher resolutions. So not
I think
some,
a lot of
once
it
again,
comes down to, like, once you get used to using each one of these different tools, you pick up the right one depending on exactly what you're trying to do at that time. I'm always looking for how can I get the job done with as little effort and time as possible? And whatever tool that is I need to pick up at that specific moment is the right one, right? I don't think that any one of these is always going to be right. I think that they all have their place. So really knowing what tool to pick up is key. And that just comes with experience and time.
Optimization is the name of the game when we're trying to cut costs and also make our time. We don't want to be standing around for watching the scanner spin all day, right?
Right.
So that's the flash with the premium, and you can see once again that moves accuracy a little bit more towards speed. Now, the flash technology with the Orbis comes with the purchase of the Orbis, so it's not that subscription. This brings speed towards accuracy, and these flash scans, instead of just walking around, you're going to stop for 15 seconds, activate a flash scan, and you can either just hold it right in front of you, or you can have a monopod that you just extend if you really need it to be as stable and accurate as possible. And you can use that to get really, really great data. So once again, we're seeing this pipe here, and this is a flash scan. So not the mobile data. The mobile data would most likely be a little bit more noisy and maybe potentially a little less data around here. The color wouldn't look as good. This flash scan gives you that option to, oh, this is an area that I really, really need good accuracy on. Let me do a 15-second flash scan. And this is a 270 degrees. So you're capturing mainly what is in front of you, not what's behind you. So David, give me the same thing that you were talking about when you've used this and seen success, when you pushed it to its limits.
So kind of the same as you kind of mentioned it, the fact that it's 270 degrees, it doesn't scan behind itself. So whenever I do use flash on the Orbis, I end up having to scan twice, right? So I'll scan ahead of me and then I'll turn around and scan the other direction. And I'll do that kind of everywhere almost to make single scans. But the real speed piece here is that the SLAM algorithm, even if you don't use that data, because you're right, it is a little bit noisier. So if you really need clean data, I've scanned entire buildings with just the flash scans and thrown away the SLAM data, just because I really needed that accuracy, and use the SLAM data as my registration for those flash scans. Yep. Which the beauty there is you don't have to have them all connect. You don't have to have the overlap that you have to have in the TLS, right? So when you're doing registration with the TLS, you have to have an overlap to make sure those things all connect. When you use the Orbis from the flash scans, you could have one flash scan per room and they could all be disconnected. But that SLAM behind the scenes is what's holding them all together as like a network. So that's where I really see this is helpful. But as you can see, there's going to be dead data like behind that column right there, right behind that bollard. So you're going to have to scan multiple times, just like you would anywhere else. It really depends on what I'm trying to do. Again, do I need the kind of detail on that accuracy? I would actually most of the time end up spending more time using just the SLAM algorithm and using the SLAM scan.
Just using the mobile data?
Flash acute as much, just because I can walk around for that 15 seconds and get more angles and more details of areas if I don't need 2mm accuracy, 3mm accuracy, right? So really, again, it comes down to what you're trying to do. If I'm just trying to get a general idea where studs are and walls and columns, I would probably just stick with just the SLAM data because I can get more of it during that 15 seconds than just that one static stamp, that viewpoint.
Yeah, and I think, once again, we've talked about these kind of separately now, but once again, these are two different tools, many different ways to use them, of course. And now talking about combining them, let's go back to that campus idea. We've got the whole campus. We can use that Orbis to just get the general area around the buildings, right? It would take a really long time to scan a whole campus, and I'm sure you can attest to that, David, that it's taken a long time with just TLS getting those buildings.
Yes, I have scanned a lot using a TLS. I just scanned a 50-acre site with 15 parking decks and 10 buildings, and inside and outside. It was a lot of effort. I lost a lot of years of my life trying to put all that together and gather all that data. I was hoping to use the GeoSLAM at the time to do a lot of that capture, and part of that was I didn't really know how to use it as well as I probably needed to. So I'll take the blame on some of that. But if I had an Orbis and had the capabilities that I have now with an Orbis, I could have chopped off a third of my entire time just by the speed of capture that data. So
would have gained some years of your life, right?
Gained some of those years' life back, gained some gray hairs back. Stress levels would have been a lot less. But again, like you said, I think I could have scanned the entire campus with the Orbis mobile technology a lot faster than the TLS, and it would have come together a lot quicker too, a lot more accurate.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the outside. We transition to inside. We have those classrooms. We can use, of course, if we wanted to, we could continue using Orbis, but if we need those higher details, we can switch over to the Flash technology, right? We can switch and use the Flash, either the Orbis or Flash for the premium, and just go through those areas. Right. And lastly, we have that mechanical room that we talked about in there. We definitely want that to have a little bit more accuracy. So we're going to switch over to maybe just using the focus without the Flash and up our resolution to whatever we need it to be. And that all comes with, of course, the planning. If we plan that out, we save a few years of our life right there, and it makes us faster, more cost effective, and just overall happier with the final product.
The concept about planning out and chopping it up into bite-sized chunks, right? If you plan the entire building, you can literally just say, I want to put this entire floor using SLAM data, or I want to do the hallways using TLS, or I want to do the stairwells in TLS. You can bring it all into scene and combine it all together there. So you're not like limited by not having all these different separate data sets, because you can bring all that data together as one big giant data set and then have one holistic view of the entire building.
And you talked about stairways, and at the time we didn't introduce the Orbis Flash into the conversation yet, but you can use that Flash scan to help connect multiple floors in clusters. So if you started a cluster of level 1, you could then snap a Flash scan at the end of the scanning at the stairwell, and then when you start your new scan at that stairwell again on level 2, you snap another Flash scan. You can combine those together in scene as long as you have that overlap together. So even without the focus, you're able to utilize the registration and this new hybridized tool to help make a better end product. All right, so jumping over just to look at a few more Flash projects. You can see this being used more in an outdoor area, really looking great there. Construction sites, we've all seen there's a lot of clutter that can be around in a construction site. So just like David was saying, you do have to be careful. If you wanted to get some of the walls, they might be covered where you're doing the flash scan, but luckily it's only 15 seconds. So if you needed to do another one, you could do it. Or just like David was saying, you could just walk around with the mobile scan and get even more data that way. So you have those options.
I think you mentioned it before, having people walking around. No job site's going to stop what they're doing so that you can scan. That's not a reality of construction. So you're at the behest of them. So you got to work around them. So sometimes you may have a wide open job site at the end of the day, and you can have the luxury of that. But most of the time, you're going to be walking around. People are going to be moving. Trucks are going to be moving places. You're going to have to work around them. So the faster you can get in and get out, the better.
Yeah,
So,
and that's where the Orbis really, really shines in that moment. I'm sure we've all had situations that we've been scanning, and you set up your scanner, and then you come back later, and the door is closed because someone went through it, and you're like, okay, well, I meant to have that doorway open for that scan, but someone had to do something. So we've had those situations. But just right here, here's what I was talking about with that scan at the stairway that you can do. So I think really we've kind of touched on everything here. So just to pull it back full circle to give you the overview of what we really wanted to show you here is, number one, plan out your sites, right? Know why you're scanning and what you're doing it for. That's going to help you decide which tools do you pick from your toolbox. Is it going to be the Orbis? Is it going to be Orbis with Flash? Is it going to be the premium? Is it going to be the premium with Flash? Or is it going to be a mixture of everything? Just like David said, you can, cut things into smaller projects and make it more manageable so that it can come together. And when you're using things, of course, time, budget, all of these things are going to affect how you can scan and what you're going to do. You just need to pick the right tool. And at the end of the day, the biggest one being why you're scanning and what you're doing it for is going to be the big decider. But sometimes time can trump that, right? Sometimes they'll ask you to do the impossible. And with these tools now, you have some options to help you out there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for running through and showcasing the different tools. I know we have quite a few questions that have popped in, but I just wanted to save them for the end. So if you don't mind, let's take a couple of these. First one I want to throw out is, could you talk a little bit about some of the best practices for SLAM capture to avoid compounding errors? So maybe we even talk about that floor plan that we had open where we've got that building and there's all those rooms and there's all those hallways. How do you approach scanning that to avoid errors when you're capturing all that data?
Yeah, so what you're noticing a lot in these rooms that they're going into, you have these loops, these closed loops. And all that really means is that you're going back and making sure that you actually have a loop around that closes, instead of if you went like down a highway and you just ended from 1 mile to the next, it's just going to be an open loop because there's an end and a beginning and they don't come back to each other. So when we talk about closed loops, you want to do those throughout bigger areas. So you can see like in this big courtyard area in the middle, they have that closed loop there that gets data that overlaps. And especially you want to start and end in the same place. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to mark it with a little marker, but you want to be with at least a meter within where you want to stop and start. And the last one I can definitely talk about, and you can see it a little bit in here, is how to scan. Is you want to kind of serpentine a little bit sometimes in longer hallways, and you want to go around corners. Trying to think of the right way to say this, but you want to round your corners instead of doing hard cuts. And that's really going to make sure that you don't have either an issue with it coming together at all, because if you do those hard cuts, you're not giving any stitching ability there. But if you do those rounded ones, it knows that it's an actual corner. David, anything you learned?
It may be overkill, and I'm sure it is. I'm sure you guys can tell me that it is. But I found that whenever I go around a corner or up a stair or anything that's a small, narrow area, I will stop for a second and actually do a full 360 around myself. because in my mind, again, I'm just painting more from that angle. So
Yeah.
I've noticed better results when I do that. And I slowly, like whenever I see a point that might be a hard transition, like you said, a start point, I'll just literally stop and just do a full 360 for 10 seconds and then keep going.
Hey,
So if you
it's
see my
10
path, so it'll be
seconds,
like
right?
a path and a spin around, and then I'll go. And again, that could be overkill. I don't know, but I've just seen the data look better on my end. So it
And
works for
it's
me.
10 seconds of your time. I mean,
And I know that it's going to fix it, because otherwise I could ruin the entire thing, right?
yeah, better to be safe than sorry on that. And 10 seconds of your time versus, once again, imagine how long it would have taken to scan this entire thing, 5 hours versus 30 minutes. Adding another 10 seconds to a integral
Right.
area that you need good data in is well worth your time.
Matt, did you mention mirrors? Was that part of the question?
No, but that's a good question.
To avoid mirrors. So
Yep.
this is maybe this is something you can answer for me, Brandon, is the reflectivity and glass issue with SLAM is a challenge. You know, one of the benefits of having a TLS is you're scanning from one standpoint. So I can go in there and clean any kind of reflectivity, mirrors, and things like that, scan by scan. With SLAM data, you can't. It's gonna get every window, every reflectivity. So I find a lot of ghosting in a lot of areas. So what I've started doing is whenever I know that there's an area with a mirror, I will literally go into the room and almost use myself as a cone and back up to the mirror and scan the rest of the place to kind of block the mirror, just because I know the data is going to be trashed right there.
Yeah.
So again, it's a bit of a workaround, but I've noticed that it helps me get better data in those areas, like bathrooms where you have a mirror, or hallways where you have a bunch of glass. I'll intentionally not paint those areas because I know that it's going to cause issues.
And that's something to keep in mind when you're planning, right? Once again, that planning is going to pay off there. There's not a easy way around that with the Orbis, because just like you said, it's a continuous scan. So instead of with the premium, you could, of course, delete data out very easily from one scan location. With this one, it's one continuous one. So there's not a way to isolate that area. So you either have to do what you did and try your best not to actually capture it, or you can go in beforehand and cover it up, which of course takes time. And you're always balancing, which one do you want to do? More time prepping, or, potentially missing out on some data there. So you would just paint it a little bit easier there. Now,
that's not just the Orbis either. That's just SLAM. That's SLAM in general. That's any tool that I've used using SLAM data. It's not just the Orbis. It's this technology. It's one giant scan, so you can't isolate each vantage point.
Now, if we're talking a really, really integral spot that you need that area, you could potentially do a flash scan there, and then you could delete it out a little bit more. But once again, you don't want to just whip it over during a flash scan. You still need to get it with the SLAM. So it is a little bit difficult. I would say if it's an integral area, that's where you would use the premium, maybe just in that area. And especially if you're only thinking about floor plans, if there's a mirror there, it has other walls around it. You can very easily tell that they're going to connect, right? That mirror is not going to change that area.
Another question I want to throw out is, and I don't know the process for this, so maybe you could explain it as well, but is there a good rule of thumb for control intervals for both the TLS versus using mobile? So, David, you mentioned using control. If you're going to combine different tools, what does that look like to you between those tools?
Well, I've seen less drift when you use control with the Orbis specifically, because like you said, Brandon, you're talking about hallways, for example. When you start to go straight down a hallway, it's going to have some drift unless you figure out ways to serpentine around. But putting checkerboards up on the hallway and having those shot in at certain intervals, like every 20 or 30 feet, really helps. But again, it depends on what you're scanning, right? If you have enough unique identifying objects, I don't need as much of that, right? But if you have an area that's going to be repetitive, or like I said, hallways, corridors specifically seem to be an issue. Unless you have some sort of control set in. And the same thing with the TLS, really. If you're not doing that right, you're going to have run into the exact same issues.
Yeah, and with the Orbis, you can actually get control points just by either taking a flash scan of the area and having that just to mark it manually, or you can use just once again on the Orbis itself. There's a button to take a control point. If you just push it up against a wall in an area, it will take that control point. And just like David said, a larger project or something that goes vertically high or a long ways down, control is always a very good way to help mitigate drift. But at the end of the day, all scanners are going to have that. It's just because there's error, propagating error, just like we've talked about, right? So maybe eventually there will be a way where it's perfect, but right now control is the best way to help mitigate that error.
Awesome. David, on the control point conversation, somebody said, while they say the value of using a licensed surveyor, what is a way that people can, capture their own control points in a certain method? Do you guys use your own, crews to kind of set control if you need it or pull it in, or what does that look like?
And again, it depends on the job. If it's a project that we're building, we'll have control already set up by a survey team, and then those control points are already be set. And as Brandon mentioned, if you're using the Orbis, you can go and literally just set down the Orbis on that control point and click a button and it captures where that is. That's how it kind of ties. I saw a question pop up that asked that question. But yeah, it depends on the job. So some of these projects, we won't even have the project yet. So we won't even have survey control set up out there. So again, it depends on if we're just trying to get a floor plan. That's the case. Probably won't worry about it as much. But again, it just comes down to the use case and how accurate we really have to be, or how complex the project is, really, right? So it's like, if it is a multi-level project, maybe we do need control to go up and down the building. But again, it just depends on the job.
Awesome. That sounds good. There's a few more questions that are coming in still. I know we're pretty close on time here, so we will gather all the questions that were not answered and make sure that we can get those back to you guys. Let's throw one more here. Let's see. When you look at a space like this floor plan, would there ever be a time that you actually mix using a mobile and a terrestrial option, or is it just one versus the other?
Yeah, and I think once again, depends on what you want out of it. If you just want the building, and then there's that MEP room, there's that area with the windows that David was talking about. When you need accuracy, you're going to use the terrestrial laser scanner. You're going to be using that focus. When you just need to get the general area around that to give, someone an idea of, okay, there's a mechanical room, and then we need to cross over to another mechanical room, 5-minute walk away. Well, let's bridge the gap with a Orbis and do the premium scans inside of both of those mechanical rooms, and then you can just put them together, right? I think that's a really good way of utilizing that. I mean, David, have you had any projects recently where you've used both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at this example of this floor plan, I would probably use the TLS in those major big areas and kind of use that as a spine in a way, just because I know that that's going to be more accurate in the Orbis. Yes. And I would use the Orbis around all those exterior walls and all those rooms, and then tie all that data together and using those TLS scans as that spine and that rigid point. So then at that point, maybe I'll tie my TLS scans to my control and I don't have to worry about tying the Orbis to the control points.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point there is you're going to lose a lot more time going into the little rooms than you are going into the big rooms with the focus. So right. That's where it really shines, when you have those doorways stopping you from seeing information. Even if you do one scan in all of those rooms, you have to have doorway scans as well. Right. So it adds up a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great example. Well, thank you guys very much for sharing today, coming and talking about the different tools that are available, processes, and when you might use one versus the other. Hopefully everybody could take some insight out of this as they're looking at different tools, different project types. And I'm sure, again, anybody here would be interested in helping you answer some further questions. We know a lot of people are digging into these technologies for the first time today. And, there sometimes you're wondering these, like, when should I look at a mobile? When should I look at a terrestrial? So hopefully this provides some value and insight back to you guys. Thanks for joining. And we're going to wrap up here. So David and Brandon, thank you both for your time today.
Absolutely.